As we mentioned many times, one of the most beautiful Sfarim that tell us stories of times past is Sipurei Hasidim from Reb Shlomo Yosef Zevin, who was one of the greatest scholars in our generation. He passed away about 35 years ago. So in this week's Parsha, he has a beautiful story of the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Rebbe of Lubavitch. This took place about 150 years ago approximately. And he said as follows, that one time the Tzemach Tzedek went to a city called Minsk. And he went there to have like a little discussion with the local Rabbanim, etc. But obviously his name was already very well known in the area. So when he came to Minsk, hundreds and thousands of people came to greet him and to hear his Toras and to meet with him, etc. The Tzemach Tzedek went with his son, one of his sons. When his son saw what is going on here, the kavod, the honor that people are giving to his father. So he wrote a letter to his mother at home, and he wrote how beautiful it is and how he has so much hanoi, he has so much pleasure from the fact that people are really giving his father the true kavod, the true honor that he deserves. This is the letter that he wrote to his mother. The Tzemach Tzedek came home, and somehow he noticed that letter. So he called over his son, and he started screaming at him and reprimanding him. He gave him musar, what kind of business is this? How do you write such things? And the son didn't know what did he do wrong over here. The Rebbetzin saw this whole incident, so she went over to the Tzemach Tzedek and she asked him, what's the big deal? What are you screaming at him for? He wrote something very normal. And the Tzemach Tzedek answered the following line. He said it in Yiddish. My blood was gushing over there at this event. And he has pleasure. Because the concept of honor to a chassid and to a tzaddik, it's the worst thing that could be for him. Because a tzaddik, he is bottled to the Eibishter totally. He's totally nullified for the Eibishter, subjugated to the Eibishter totally. He doesn't have his own being, his own entity. And all of a sudden, everybody's giving him the kavod. They have to give kavod to the Eibishter, who he represents, not to him. So what we see here is very interesting. We have an event that happened, and the son looked at it as the most beautiful thing, and he had pleasure from it. The Tzemach Tzedek saw it as the worst thing, which is gushing his blood. So we're going to see in our parsha something very, very interesting. That again, we have how people can view something, the first impression that they have, and then we'll see how the Torah gives it in a total different dimension. And this is going to be a beautiful lesson that Yakov Ovinu, our father, not our great-great-grandfather, our father is giving us a lesson in a day-to-day life in an unbelievable manner to something that many, many people are struggling with. So let's go directly to the Parsha, and this is, again, as usually, based on Likutei Sichos, volume 30, pages 229 through 235, and we're going to go to one question, a second question, a third question, a fourth question, and then at the end we're going to have a beautiful puzzle, how everything fits in so beautifully in the Pshat and the Possuk. So let's go to the sources. Source number one, this is a story of Yakov Ovinu, how after he found out that Yosef is alive, and he was so excited and so happy that Yosef is alive. So what was his reaction? Let's look in source number one. In Vayigash Perik Memhei Possuk Chavches, Vayomer Yisroel. So Yaakov said, Rav, great. Oid Yosef b'nichai. My son is still alive. El chaver enu b'terem amos. I'm going to go and I'm going to see him. I'm going to meet him before I die. Source number two, Vayigash, to the next Perik, which is the next Possuk actually, Perik Memvav Possuk Aleph, says the Torah, Vayisa Yisroel v'chol asher lo, and Yaakov Avinu traveled with everything that he has, all his belongings, Vayova be'er Shava, and he came to Beersheva, Vayizbach zevochim lelekei aviv Yitzchak, and he brought karbonos, he brought sacrifices to the Rebishter, to the God of his father Yitzchak. Next Possuk, Possuk Beis. Vayomer Elikim leYisroel b'maris halayla. So the Rebbe came to Yakov Ovinu in a vision at night. Vayomer, and he said, Yaakov, Yaakov. He called him twice, and it's known in the Torah when the Rebbe calls somebody twice, it's Lashon Chiba, it's a sign of love. Vayomer hinein, and Yaakov said, here I am. Possuk Gimel, third Possuk. Vayomer, and the Rebbe said, Anoichi hakel elekei avicha. I am the Rebbe, the God of your father. Al tira merdo Mitzrayim. Don't be afraid to go down to Egypt. Why? Because you're going to go to Egypt, I'm going to make you into a big nation. Possuk Daled. I'm going to go down with you to Mitzrayim, and I'm going to bring you back up from Mitzrayim, from the Golus, and Yosef will take care of everything that you need. Possuk Hey, Yaakov mi Beersheva. Yaakov got up from Beersheva. Vayisu bnei Yisrael es Yaakov aviyim, and the children of Yaakov carried their father. Golus, with the wagons, asher sholach Pari los esaisei, in the wagons that Pari sent to take him along. Vayikves mikneihem vesrechusham asher rochshu be'eretz Canaan, and they took all their belongings and everything that they bought in Eretz Canaan. Vayovayu Mitzrayim, and they came to Mitzrayim. We're going to focus on Possuk Gimel, where we said that the Rebbe came to Yaakov at night, and he told him, Al tira merdo Mitzrayim, don't be afraid of going down to Mitzrayim. What does Rashi say? Look in source number 3, Rashi, on Possuk Gimel. Al tira merdo Mitzrayim, don't be afraid to go down to Mitzrayim. What's he afraid of? The Possuk doesn't say anything that he's afraid. Says Rashi, Lefi shehoyo meitzer, because Yakov Ovinu was pain, was in agony, he was hurt. Al shenizkak lotes lechutz laretz, that he has to leave Eretz Yisroel and go into chutz laretz, go outside of Eretz Yisroel. So the Rebbe says, don't worry, everything will be just fine when you go down to Mitzrayim. This Rashi is very strange, because we're going to see that Rashi says two things which are not what the Possuk is saying. What does the Rebbe tell Yaakov? Al tira merdo Mitzrayim. Don't be afraid of going down to Mitzrayim. What does Rashi say? Lefi shehoyo meitzer, because he was hurt. He was in agony, he was in pain. Rashi should have said, Lefi shehoyo mefached, he was afraid. No. Fear and hurt is two separate things. What is fear? Fear, when someone is afraid, what happens? He worries about something. If he's afraid of what's going to happen, so he worries, should he do this, should he do that? Hurt, he knows exactly what's happening. It just hurts. So Rashi mixes two things which have absolutely nothing to do with each other. The Rebbe is saying, don't be afraid of going down to Mitzrayim. We don't see what he's afraid of. We see he has a problem leaving Chutz Laretz. So why does Rashi change the situation from fear to hurt? And not only that, the Possuk says that what is Yakov Ovinu afraid of? Going to Egypt. What does Rashi say? What is he worried about? Leaving Eretz Yisroel. Which means the fact that he's going to Egypt, that is not the problem. The problem is that he's leaving Eretz Yisroel. Since when do we have that as a problem? And why isn't Rashi saying that he's afraid of going to Mitzrayim? Let's go to the source of Rashi. Go to source number 4. Where's the source of Rashi? It's a Pirkei de Rabbi Lezer. Pirkei de Rabbi Lezer, by the way, was written before the Gemara. The first thing of the time of the Gemara, besides from Megillas Tainis, we're not going to get into that, was Pirkei de Rabbi Lezer ben Hurkinus. And this was one of the first Sfarim written that had about things that had to do with the Torah, with Halacha. So Perek Lametes, it says as follows: Shama Yaakov al Yosef shehu chai. Yakov Ovinu heard that Yosef is alive. So Yakov Ovinu started thinking to himself, and he said, how can I leave the land of my parents and the land where I was born? The land where the Rebishter, the Shechina, is in Eretz Yisroel. And I'm going to go to the land of the children of Cham. Who is Cham? Mitzrayim, as we'll soon see in a minute. In a land where there is no Yiras Shamayim. How do we know that Cham means Mitzrayim? Look in source number 5, because in Tehillim, in Perek Chav Gimel, Possuk Chav Gimel, it says, Vayovi Yisrael Mitzrayim. Yaakov came to Egypt. Ve'Yaakov gar be'eretz Cham. It's in a poetic way, it says Yisroel and Yaakov lived in the land of Chom, which is the land of Mitzrayim. So we see over here that even the Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer says that he had a problem leaving Eretz Yisroel, but the Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer adds, what was his problem of leaving Eretz Yisroel, going to Eretz Mitzrayim, where there is no Yiras Shamayim? So if Rashi would have done it like in the source, it would be fine. Rashi says that it hurt him, they has to leave Chutz La'aretz to go to Egypt, which is a bad place. No, Rashi doesn't do that. Rashi takes the first half of what the Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer says, that his problem is leaving Eretz Yisrael, but getting to Mitzrayim is not a problem. Why not? The Possuk says that the problem is going down to Mitzrayim. What's the problem going to Chutz La'aretz? No. So some want to answer, some of the Mefarshim want to say, that going to Egypt, he wasn't so afraid. Why wasn't he so afraid? Look in source number 6. As a matter of fact, they want to say that there's nothing to worry about in Mitzrayim. If you look at number 6, you will see that Rashi already told us that Yaakov had a very good reason why to worry about Mitzrayim. Look at what it says in source number 6 in Parsha Lech Lecha Perek Yud Beis Possuk Yud Ches. That when Avrohom Ovinu went to Mitzrayim, Vayemer Paro le Avrohom, when Paro told Avrohom, and when he took Sarah, the whole story how he took Sarah, and then the Rebbe gave Paro the plague, so he gave back Sarah. What does it say? When Paro gave back Sarah to Avrohom, what did he say? Take your wife and leave Mitzrayim. Says Rashi over there, not like Avimelech that told Avrohom Avinu, you could stay here in Plishtim without a problem. He told him, leave. Why? Pare said, leave, don't stay here. Why? Because the Mitzrim are very, very immoral people. So therefore, the Avrohom Avinu had to leave Mitzrayim. So therefore, those who say that Yakov Avinu wasn't afraid to go to Mitzrayim because Mitzrayim was a good place, no. Mitzrayim already, we know that is a very bad place. So the question is, why is it that Rashi doesn't say that Yaakov's problem was going down to Mitzrayim? And not only that, according to Rashi, what is the Rebbe answering? Don't worry about going out of Chutz La'aretz, because over there I'm going to make you into a good nation. What does one thing have to do with the other? If he goes to Mitzrayim and the Rebbe says, in Mitzrayim I'm going to make you into a big nation, I understand. But that Rashi's problem is not that. Rashi's problem is the fact that he's going out of Eretz Yisroel. So what's the answer? Because I'm going to make you into a big nation. That's not what the Rebbe answers to him. Now it's interesting, when we look in the Zohar, according to the Zohar, this question taka is not there. Look in source number 7. The Zohar in Chelik Aleph, page Reich Chav Beis, Amud Aleph, the Zohar says as follows: Beshaito dehavi nochis Yaakov leMitzrayim. When Yaakov was going down to Mitzrayim, havi dochil havi, he was afraid. Omar, he said, Dilma chas v'sholem ishtatzum bona beina mayo. Maybe my children are going to assimilate together with the other nations, with Mitzrayim, and there's going to be trouble. And the Zohar says that the Rebbe told him, don't worry, I'll take care of you, everything will be just fine. So according to the Zohar, Yakov Ovinu was afraid of going down to Mitzrayim because of assimilation. According to Rashi, it seems like no. He's not afraid of going out to Mitzrayim of assimilation. He's afraid of the fact of leaving Eretz Yisroel. Why? Where do we see that this is a problem? So, there are some people that want to answer that he was not afraid to go down to Mitzrayim. Even though Rashi before said that Mitzrayim is a very immoral place, Yaakov was not afraid. Why wasn't he afraid? Let's go to source number 8. Because before, when Yosef tells the brothers, go and tell my father to come, what does he say? Look at source number 8, in Vayigash Perik Memhei Possuk Tes, Maharu Valu El Avi. When he revealed himself to his brothers, said, quickly, go up to my father, go to Eretz Yisroel to my father, V'amartem Elam, and you should tell them, Redo Elai, come down to me, I'm the boss of Mitzrayim, come, we'll have a very good time. And not only come to me, you're going to be next to me, your whole family, I'm going to protect you from these immoral people, and you're going to have your own place where to be. Why? Because there's another 5 years of hunger, so therefore come down to me to Egypt. Where's Yaakov going to live? In Eretz Goshen, in his own place. And as we see later in Shemos, we're going to see how they were sort of isolated in their own ghetto, as we call it. Continue with our source number 9. What does it say in Parshas Va'era? By the plague of Orev, when all the animals came. What did the Rebbe say in Parshas Va'era, Perik Ches, Possuk Yud Ches, source number 9? Vehifleisi bayom ahu es Eretz Goshen. I'm going to separate, to make different, the land of Goshen, Asher Am Yom Midaleha, where my nation, the Yidden, are there. Which means the Rebbe looks at Goshen, where the Yidden are, as a separate entity. So therefore, Yaakov wasn't so afraid because he had his protection. So everything was very nice and dandy. And or there's another place later in source number 10, also in Parshas Va'era, by another Makkah, by the Makkah of Barad, by the plague of the hail. What does it say? In Perik Tes Possuk Chavav says the Torah that Be'eretz Goshen Asher Sham B'nei Yisroel, in the land of Goshen, where the Yidden are, there was no Barad. So we see clearly here that in theory, Yaakov was not afraid to go down to Egypt. Why? Because of it there, Yosef took care of him and gave him his own place. So where does Rashi take that he had a problem of going out to Chutz La'aretz? The Possuk is very clear. Al tira merda Mitzrayim. Don't be afraid to go down to Mitzrayim. Why? Because Mitzrayim is this terrible place of immoral people. But Yosef will take care of you, so everything is fine. Comes Rashi and says no. That what does it mean? Don't not be afraid to go down to Mitzrayim because it hurts him to leave to go Chutz La'aretz. But what does one thing have to do with another? It just makes absolutely no sense. We're going to bring one more question and then we'll go to the answer. When we go to source 11, this is the Cheskuni, as we mentioned many times. Who the Cheskuni is? He's one of the biggest Mefarshim on Rashi. And the other Mefarshim, they say as follows. Look at source number 11. Hoyo Yaakov Misyare. Yaakov was afraid. And he said as follows. Now that I'm going to go down to Egypt, what's going to happen? We're getting closer to the time that was told to my Zaydi, to Avrohom Ovinu, that we're getting very close to the Gzeira, the decree that the Rebbe made, that his children are going to be in a land which is not theirs. And what's going to happen? They're going to be tortured for a long time. Right? So Yakov Ovinu feared, he was afraid. Amar LaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Rebbe said, Al tira merda Mitzrayim. Don't be afraid to go down to Mitzrayim. Im lo vicha is harti. If I told this to your father, to your grandfather, I came to promise you that im karvu imi shibud inui, just like they came to the time of the pain, of the affliction. Also the blessing that I gave to your grandfather, that I'm going to make you to a big nation. By Lech Lecha, the Rebbe told Avrohom Avinu, I'm going to make you to a great nation. And that is what the Rebbe tells Yakov Avinu here, So according to the Cheskuni in this Mefarshim, there was a fear, not a fear of the assimilation. He was afraid of the Gzeire of Avod Avinu Eisam Arba Meis Shana, that he's going to be Mitzrayim for 400 years. That's what he was afraid of. Says the Rebbe, yes, don't worry. The Rebbe Taka is going to do that, but at the same time, you're going to become into a big nation, so you have nothing to worry about. And as a matter of fact, also the Targum Yonus and Ben Uziel on the Possuk also says approximately the same thing. What does it say in source number 12 in Targum Yonusan? Don't be afraid to go down to Mitzrayim. Why? Al Eisek Shibud the Paskesim Avrohom, because of the Shibud, the Gzeira of the fact that the Jews are going to be slaves in Egypt. Now, this, what the Cheskuni says and the Targum Yonusan say, it sounds also very good in Pshuta Shel Mikra, in the simple Pshat of the Possuk. Al Tira, Merda, Mitzrayim. Rashi could have said very simple. Why is Yaakov afraid? He's afraid of the Gzeira of Ben Absarim. It's something that he learned before in the Possuk. Comes Rashi says no. He's not afraid of that. He's not afraid of anything. He's just worried of going out to Chutz La'aretz. So the question is, where does Rashi take this from? Why all of a sudden? Where do we see this in the Possuk? And the main question is, what is the Rebbe answering? Don't be afraid to go down to Mitzrayim, because I'm going to make you a big nation. According to Rashi, he's afraid of going to Chutz La'aretz. The fact that he's going to make him a good nation, a big nation, doesn't answer the question and doesn't take away the pain. So we have to understand what is going on over here. Now we're going to see something very, very beautiful. The answer is just 2 words over here. Let's go back to source number 1 and 2. What did we say right in the beginning? The brothers came and told Yaakov that Yosef is alive. What's Yaakov's first reaction? Vayomer Yisrael, in source 1. I'm running, I'm going to see Yosef, I'm so happy. Did he worry about going to Egypt? No. He's going to see Yosef. Not only that. What does he do right after that Possuk? The next Possuk, source number 2. Vayisa Yisroel v'chol asher le. Yaakov took everything that he has. Megait, we're going to Egypt. Is he worried about anything? No, everything is just fine. All of a sudden, Vayigash came to Beersheva, comes the Rebbe and says, Yaakov, don't be afraid to go down to Mitzrayim. Where do you see that he's afraid? He's going, Gagechen. He's already traveling. If he would have to worry or be afraid, when would that have to be? As soon as he heard that Yosef is in Mitzrayim and he wants to go and see him, he should have said, I want to go see Yosef, but I have a little problem. I'm afraid of going down to Mitzrayim, because if I go down to Mitzrayim, I have the problem of the exile, I have the problem of this, the problem of that. No. It says clearly, he's going, Gagechen. He got to Beersheva, all of a sudden something happened in Beersheva. What happened in Beersheva? Not only that, if you give a look in source number 14, you'll see that, you remember before we mentioned about the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. On the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, there is a pirush of the Radal. So Radal says, in source number 14, he asked this kasha. Here he's afraid, and before he was ready to travel. What happened all of a sudden in between? He says, because he says, I want to go see Yosef. It doesn't mean that he wants to go to Mitzrayim with everything. His intention was to go to Eretz Yisroel, to Mitzrayim, and come right back. That was his intention originally. Comes the Rebbe, v'kiven shenemar lo yal tira, azu shekostev vayokum Yaakov vayisa ba'Golus vayikos mikneihem. After the Rebbe told him, don't be afraid, that's when he took everything that he has. Which means, lechatchila when he was just going to Mitzrayim for a day or two, just to see Yosef. Then, once the Rebbe told him, al tira merdom Mitzrayim, don't be afraid, that's when he took everything. Says the Rebbe, no. It doesn't make sense. Because if you look at the Psukim, first it says, Vayisa Yisroel v'chol asher lo. Yisroel traveled with everything till Beersheva, which was miles from Hebron or where he came from. Then the Rebbe came and said, Al tira merda Mitzrayim. So you can't say that in his mind was lachatchila just to go for a day or two, because it says that Yakov Ovinu took everything with him. So we're back to square one. What is going on over here? Therefore, says Rashi, you're right. Yakov Ovinu was not afraid of anything. And you see, he's traveling, he's going. All of a sudden, he came to Beersheva. All of a sudden, he started getting a little pain. It started hurting him. Something hurt him over here. What hurt him over here? All of a sudden in Beersheva, everything is fine. Let's look in source number 15. Source number 15 is a medrash on Parsha Vayetze. What does it say in Parsha Vayetze? Parsha Vayetze, we learned that Yakov Ovinu left his father's house. Vayetze Yaakov mi Beersheva. Yaakov left Beersheva. Where did he go to? Choron, right? To Lavan. Says the Medrash, Omar, he said to himself like this, Abba, my father, Yitzchok, B'shah shebikesh lotzes l'chutz la'aretz, when he wanted to leave to outside of Eretz Yisroel, Meheichon hurshe, where did the Rebbe give him permission to leave Eretz Yisroel? Lo mi Beersheva? Wasn't it in Beersheva? The story of Yitzchak previously in Parsha told us. Afani hareini heilich leBeersheva. I'm also going to go till Beersheva, till the border. Im neisen lireshus. If the Rebbe gives me permission, hareini yaitz, I'm going to leave. Aber veim la veini yaitz, and if not, I'm not going to leave. What's that special about Beersheva? Says the Radal, source number 16. The Beersheva hoyo ala gvul. Beersheva was on the border of Eretz Yisroel. Not everybody agrees with this, but the Radal says this clear. Velochen ein lereshus lotzis bisham bli netilas reshus. Yakov Ovinu had no permission to leave Eretz Yisroel without permission, so therefore when he came to Beersheva, he got the permission. So now we understand what's happening here. Yakov Ovinu was not afraid to go down to Mitzrayim. He knew that everything is just nice and dandy. He got to the border. All of a sudden, he realized, oops, I'm leaving Eretz Yisroel. It started hurting him a little. Not fear, hurt. As we're going to see now, what is this hurt and what's this feeling? He knew lechatchila that he's going to leave. He already knew that in order to go from where he lived to Yosef in Mitzrayim, he's going to have to come to a border and leave to Chutz La'aretz. Why wasn't he worried? No, that's not a kasha. Why isn't that a kasha? Look at source number 17. We already had such a thing in the Torah. In the end of Parsha Bereishis, it says that the Eibishter regretted that he created man. Right? Vayinochem Hashem. The Eibishter regretted. Bereishis Peirik Vav Possuk Vav, source number 17. Vayinochem Hashem ki oseh sa'adam ba'aretz. The Eibishter regretted that he made man. Vayis'atzev eliboy, and he was upset at himself. Says Rashi, it's a long Rashi over there, but in the middle he brings a story. That there was a certain apikoides, a person who does not believe in Torah, that he asked Rabbi Shua ben Karcha. Amar lo, he told him as follows: don't you believe that the Rebbe knows the future? Amar lo, Rabbi Shua ben Karcha said, of course the Rebbe knows the future. Amar lo, so he asked him he says that he was upset that he created man. If the Rebbe knows the future, when he created man, he knew there's going to be a problem. So why did he get upset? Amar lo, Rabbi Shua ben Karcha answered him with a mashal. What did he say? Did you ever have a baby boy? Amar lo, he said, sure. Amar lo, Rabbi Shua ben Karcha asked him, what did you do? Amar lo, so he answered back, I made a big party, and I was happy, and everybody else was happy. Amar lo, Rabbi Shua ben Karcha told him, didn't you know that eventually he's going to die? What are you making such a big party? He's eventually going to die. Amar lo, the Pekera said, no, you got the story wrong. There's a time for rejoicing and there's a time for mourning, for crying. Amar lo, Rabbi Shua ben Karcha said, the same way the Eibishter creates man. And why did he create, even though he knew there's going to be a Rishoim? Because of the tzaddikim which are going to come out from this world. So therefore, Rashi already explained that it's possible at a time to be happy, even though I know that later there's going to be a problem. The same thing over here. When Yakov Ovinu left his house to go to Mitzrayim, he had no problem because he knew he wants to go to Yosef, and he knew there's no problem going down to Mitzrayim. All of a sudden, he came to the border. This is where he had a problem. Why? Because he's leaving Eretz Yisroel, going into Chutz La'aretz. So now we understand why there's no fear, why Rashi has to take away what the Possuk says, fear, because he had no fear. It was just a pain of leaving Eretz Yisroel. So now we have to understand, so what's taket? What's the problem of leaving Eretz Yisroel? So here we're going to see something very interesting. He wasn't afraid of the simulation. He wasn't afraid of anything. And that's what the Rebbe told him, I'm going to make you into a big nation. So why was he afraid of leaving Eretz Yisroel? To go to Chutz La'aretz. What's these words here? And the answer is very, very simple and interesting. Is this the first time one of the Avos is leaving Eretz Yisroel? Is this the first time Yakov Ovinu is leaving Eretz Yisroel? Did Avrohom Avinu leave Eretz Yisroel? Yes, they all left Eretz Yisroel. Let's look in our sources. Go to source number 18. Vayetze, the Possuk that we read before. What's the first Possuk of Vayetze? At the beginning of the parsha? Vayetze Yaakov meBe'er Shava, Vayelech Harana. Do we see anywhere that he had a problem to leave Eretz Yisrael and go to Chutz La'aretz? No, everything was just fine. Look at source 19, in Parsha Lech Lecha. Perek Yud Beis Possuk Yud. The Torah says, Vayhi Rav Ba'aretz, and there was a hunger in the land of Canaan, of Eretz Yisrael. Avrohom Avinu just came to Eretz Yisrael. Lech Lecha mi'artzecha u'milatecha, go away from Choron, go into Eretz Yisrael, the Rebbe said. And he came to Eretz Yisrael. All of a sudden, Vayhi Rav Ba'aretz, there was a hunger. So what did Avrohom do? Vayered Avrohom Mitzrayim olagur sham. So Avrohom went down to where? To Mitzrayim, ki chavid Rav Ba'aretz, because there was a big hunger. Do we see anywhere that Avrohom Avinu had a problem? No. Go to source number 20. In Parsha told us, Perek Vav, Possuk Aleph, Possuk Beis, by Yitzchak, Vayhi Rav Ba'aretz, there was a hunger in the land. Milvad harav harishin asher hay b'mei Avram. Besides, for the hunger that there was in the time of Avrohom Avinu that we just read, Vayelech Yitzchak el Avimelech, Melech Plishtim gerara. So Yitzchak went to Plishtim. And the Rebbe told him, don't go to Mitzrayim. But that was for a different reason, because he was a Oila Tmima. I'm not going to go into the details. But we don't see that anybody had a problem leaving Eretz Yisroel. So why all of a sudden here, Yakov Ovinu has to go and see Yosef, and he's so happy. Mitamol over here, Vayovei. He's afraid to go out of Chutz La'aretz, Favos. So we must say that something happened over here, interesting, that's stopping Yakov Ovinu from leaving Eretz Yisroel to go into Chutz La'aretz. What is the problem? Very simple. Before, Yaakov was a private man. Avrohom was a private person. Yitzchak, they were, of course, later they became the Ovis of the Ummah. But at that time, they were private people. Eretz Yisroel didn't have any specific Kedusha at that time. And also the whole Bailus, the holiness of Eretz Yisroel wasn't yet there, and the acquirement of Eretz Yisroel to Avrohom, Yitzchak, Yaakov yet wasn't established, etc. So Eretz Yisroel didn't have any specific boundaries as far as the Ovis are concerned. However, now Yakov Ovinu has already a full-fledged family. How many people are in his family? Shivim Nefesh. Shivim Nefesh means already a full nation. Oh, here is where Yakov Ovinu had a problem. Go to your source number 21 in Parsha Vayigash, right here in our Psukim. Kol HaNefesh Lebes Yaakov Abo Mitzrayim Shivim. That how many people came? 70. And there's another beautiful sikha from the Rebbe. What's this concept of the number 70? And it brings from Rashi and Chumash and Midrashim, etc., that the number 70 is already what makes Am Yisrael into a nation, because there are all the other nations, etc. So therefore, because Yaakov Ovinu was a nation, this is where he had a problem to leave. Why did he have a problem to leave that hurt him? Look in source number 22. Yaakov Ovinu learned Torah, and he learned in Parsha Lech Lecha and Perek Yud Beis, Possuk Aleph, Vayomer Hashem el Avram, Lech Lecha me'artzecha me'ladtecha me'beis avicha, go away from the land where you were born, which is Charan over there, or Kasdim, El ha'aretz asher areka, to the land that I will show you. Which land? Eretz Yisroel. What's going to happen in Eretz Yisroel? Ve'escha legoy gadol, I'm going to make it into a big nation. So where is the nation of Yidden going to be made? In Eretz Yisroel or in Chutz La'aretz? In Eretz Yisroel. And that's what Yaakov Ovinu had a problem. Let's continue. Go to source number 23. In Lech Lecha Perek Zayin Pasuk Gimel, that when Sarah saw that she has no children, so she begged Avrohom Avinu to take Hagar and see if she's going to have a child for her. Says the Possuk, Vatikach Sarai Eshes Avrohom es Hagar Mitzris Shivchoso, that Sarai took the Hagar, the Egyptian, which was her maid, Miketz Eser Shonim Lesheves Avram Beretz Knan, when Avram was already 10 years in Eretz Knan. Says Rashi, what's this business of the 10 years in Eretz Knan? Magid she'ein yeshivas chutz la'aretz oile min haminyan, that the fact that the years that he was in Eretz Yisrael don't count. Lefi shelei nemar leve'es cholei goy godel ad sheyavel Eretz Yisrael. When is he going to have the concept of goy godel, of a big nation? Erst when he comes into Eretz Yisrael. And this is what Yaakov had a problem. It hurt him. He knows that the ve'es cholei goy godel is where? In Eretz Yisrael. And now he's going where? In Chutz La'aretz. The fact that he's going to Mitzrayim, he's not afraid. The Mitzrayim will be fine. His problem was he's leaving Chutz La'aretz, and the Ve'es Cholei Goy Gadol is not happening here. Oh, so answers the Eibishter. Al tira merda Mitzrayim. It shouldn't hurt you going to Mitzrayim. Why? Ki legoy gadol asimcha sham. Over there in Mitzrayim, you're going to have this business of goy gadol. The Eibishter told Avrohom Avinu, where is he going to have a goy gadol in Eretz Yisrael? No. What's the Pshat over there? Look at source number 24. This is in Lech Lecha Yud Beis, Possuk Beis. Ve'eschol legoy gadol. What did Rashi explain over there? Shehivticha yalabonim. Until he came to Eretz Yisrael, Avrohom Avinu had no children. Came the Rebbe and said, if you're going to leave your birthplace and you're going to go to Eretz Canaan, I'm going to make it a big nation, which means I'm going to give you children. Not that Am Yisrael is going to be built in Eretz Yisrael. So therefore, Yakov Ovinu is here, he's about to leave Chutz La'aretz, and he thought that where's the Be'ez Cholei Goy Gadol in Eretz Yisrael? So it hurt him, Meitzer, Satan Vegetan, that he's going now into Chutz La'aretz, because then he's not going to have the Goy Gadol. Says the Eibishter, don't worry. That what? What's the answer? Legoy Godel Asimcha Sham, over there. So now we took care of all the issues. It's true that the Rebbe just said, Al tiro meir do Mitzrayim, or don't be afraid to go to Mitzrayim. Comes Rashi and says, no. Why the Possuk says, don't be afraid? That's the Rebbe's cheshbon. Why he said that? We're soon going to see why. Al Pichsidus, it's going to be beautiful. But at least Rashi is trying to explain to us, no, there's no fear here. Lefisha yomeitzer. It hurt him. It was just a pain. It was a certain vegeton that he's not going to have the goy godel. And says David, don't worry. Le goy godel asimcha sham. So now everything makes sense, and we don't have to come to all the answers that the Mefarshim say that he was afraid of this, afraid of that. No, Rashi makes it very simple. He was not afraid of nothing. He wasn't worried at all. He only had a pain of the fact that he's not going to have the goy godel. But sof kol sof we need to understand. Why take does the Possuk say that the Rebbe just said, Al tiro meir do Mitzrayim, don't be afraid of going to Egypt? And Rashi says, Lefisha yomeitzer, that he was only in pain, he was only in agony from that, and of going to Chutz La'aretz. What's the connection here of the two things? Now we're going to see something beautiful, a gem. How does everybody learn Pshat? Everybody learns Pshat. What does it mean? Al tiro meir do Mitzrayim. You should not be afraid to go down to Mitzrayim, right? So, if you should not be afraid, the Rebbe is consoling Yakov Ovinu. Hab nicht mehr, don't be afraid. Daige nicht, yeah? It can't be that that's what it means. Because Rashi says, Lefi, because it hurt him that he's going out of Chutz La'aretz. What is Lefi, because? When do you use the expression because? Tzulib, because. When you make a statement which needs understanding, and you say, because of this and this, or because of that, right? Where is the question? Don't be afraid of going to Mitzrayim because it hurts you. You shouldn't be afraid because it hurts him. That's why you shouldn't be afraid. What does one thing have to do with another? So we're going to see now a piece from the Previous Rebbe, the Previous Rebbe, and we're going to see a total new Possuk. Beautiful how it teaches us how to deal with issues. But I just have to give a little introduction over here. The Previous Rebbe, one of the main things that he was known for was for his Mesiras Nefesh. This is the Rebbe's father-in-law, who passed away in 1950. When he was in Russia, the Previous Rebbe was one of the only famous Rebbes in the previous generations that was put into jail for Yiddishkeit. When the Previous Rebbe was put into jail, he went to jail several times, but the last time was a real tough one in 1927. And on his chart, they wrote that he is going to be shot to death. Lepoil, it was changed from death to exile. This was an unbelievable time for the Chassidim. It was one of the worst times. But what's interesting is that something that happened over 70 years ago at that time was one person who fought the Russian regime, the whole communist regime, and everybody thought that that's it, the Previous Rebbe is going to lose and that's it. When we look back, 80 years later, communism is gone and the Previous Rebbe has thousands of shluchim under him taking over the world. So obviously Torah is what makes it. But one of the incidents that happened over there, when the Previous Rebbe was changed from the decree of death to exile, they brought him to the train station where he was going to be exiled to Kostroma. In the train station, the Previous Rebbe made a speech. As a matter of fact, my Zaidi, my father's father, was there at the speech. That was the last time he saw the Previous Rebbe, because then the Previous Rebbe left Russia and then he never saw him again. My Zaidi never saw him again. And one of the things that the Previous Rebbe made a speech. Imagine, he was just sentenced to death. And now he's going into exile. And what does he say? Look in source number 25. In Sefer HaMaimorim, Tofresh Pezayin, page Kuf Tzadik Vov. And the Previous Rebbe said these words. He said it in Yiddish, and I'm going to translate it. Nit mit unser Willen seine mir weg von Eretz Yisroel. We did not leave Eretz Yisroel with our will. We didn't go into Golus because we wanted. Und nicht mit unserer Keiches wel mit zurückkommen in Eretz Yisroel. And not with our own power or strength, we're going to go back to Eretz Yisroel. No. Avinu Malkeinu Yisborech hat uns vertrieben in Golus. Der Eibishter is the one that sent us into Golus. Vehu Yisborech wird uns auslesen me arba kampfes aretz. And the Eibishter will take us out of Golus. And then he continued further. It's a long speech. I just quoted three little things from there. Nor unsere Gufim seien in Golus. Only our bodies are in Golus. Aber unsere Neshamas hat man in Golus nicht vertrieben. Our Neshama never went to Golus. The Friedrich Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, made of you a very strong statement. This whole concept of Golus is not something that Yidden caused. The Eibishter is the one that decided that the Yidden have to go into Golus. And the Eibishter is the one who's going to bring the Yidden back to Golus. So what happens here? The Eibishter gives a Jew the keiches to be able to handle Golus. So now comes this Rashi and tells us an unbelievable thing. The Possuk is not saying, Al tiro mer de Mitzrayim, or don't be afraid to go down to Mitzrayim. The Possuk is saying, Al tiro mer de Mitzrayim, or you will not be afraid to go down to Mitzrayim. Why won't you be afraid? Says Rashi, Lefi shehoya meitze, because it hurt him to go to Chutz La'aretz. If a person goes to Golus and he thinks he's going to somewhere good and he thinks things are very nice, that's a problem. When someone knows that Golus is not a good place, even if everything is fine in Golus, then he will be able to pull through Golus. This is an unbelievable concept. Chas v'shalom, should never happen again. One of the worst things that our nation experienced in the previous generation, which is the Holocaust. And I remember I heard once Elie Wiesel discussing it by one of the American friends in Washington. He said one of the worst things that the Nazis were doing to the people is they constantly gave them hope. They gave them hope, everything will be fine. They came in the worst situation possible to Auschwitz, and what does it say? Arbeit macht frei. You're coming here to work, everything will be just fine. They gave false hope. They played on the people. The worst thing for a person is that he thinks that where he's going is good when really it's not good. If he knows that it's no good, so he prepares himself that he knows he's going to the wrong place, he has to jump out of the train. He has to do something to get out of this situation. If he thinks that where he's going is good and really it's not, that's the worst thing. And that's what Rashi is saying. Yakov Ovinu, why he should not be afraid of Golus, even though Golus is the worst thing? Lefi shehoya meitzer, because it hurt him that he is going to Golus. So the Rebbe said, if that's the case, you have nothing to worry about, because you know where you're going, you know you don't belong in Mitzrayim. I'm going to bring you back. The person who is in Golus, and he thinks that everything is nice and fine, Baruch Hashem, he has Parnosso, he has everything, he can sit and learn, he could do everything that he needs, that's a person that has to be afraid. And that's what Yakov Ovinu is teaching us. Al tiro merda Mitzrayim. We will not be afraid of Golus. Why? Because when we are in Golus, we are not complacent with what's going on. We are constantly saying, Eibishter, we want to get out of this Golus. And that's why it's a very famous thing that when it talks about the concept of Golus, that there are some people that, unfortunately, when they have a tzara, when they have a problem, that they say, we need Moshiach. We need to get out of this Golus. The moment the tzara goes away, all of a sudden Moshiach is out of the equation. The famous Yiddish joke about the guy who used to invest money for people, and all of a sudden he lost most of that money. And there was one of the people who a day before he lost all that money, took out his money from this guy. And everybody asked him, how did you know to take out the money from this guy the day before it happened? He says, very simple. Because I met this guy the day before, and he was in shul, and he says, Oi, medafshin haben de geula. We need the geula already. I knew things are not good in business, so I right away took out my money. Okay? We don't need to get out of Golus because of the tzaras. No. We need to get out of Golus because Golus is not the place for a Jew. A Yid belongs in Eretz Yisroel. A Yid belongs in the Beis HaMikdash. If I have Parnosso, good chinuch, everything's fine. But I didn't bring my carbon this morning. Hey, I'm in Golus. I'm in the worst place possible. If the Beis HaMikdash is not built, I'm in Golus. This is the worst thing. Who cares that Baruch Hashem everything is fine? I'm in the wrong place. And that's what Yaakov is telling everybody. Lefi shehoya meitzer shayayitzel chutz la'aretz. It hurt him that he's going out of the chutz la'aretz. Because where does a Yid belong? In Eretz Yisroel. Says the Eibishter, if this is how you're going, you have nothing to worry about in going to Mitzrayim. You don't have to worry about assimilation. You don't have to worry about anything, because you know that you don't belong in Mitzrayim. And this is the message that the Rebbe constantly gave us. A Yid has to scream. It has to be written on his forehead. We want Moshiach now. We want to get out of this Golus right now. Why? Because Golus is not the place for a Jew. And when we deal with Golus in such a way that we don't want to be here, regardless of how good things look, then the Rebbe says, I'm going to bring you back from Mitzrayim. Why? Because I see, Taka, that you don't want to be there. And therefore, all together, we scream out to the Eibishter, Eibishter, we don't belong here in Golus. You promised, Yakov Ovinu, Al tira mer de Mitzrayim, that there's nothing to worry about in Golus. Why? Because we are going to handle it properly. Now the Eibishter has to do his part. That I am going to bring you back, and it's high time already that the Eibishter takes us and brings it back into Eretz Yisroel, where we belong, in the Beis Hamikdash Hashlishi, Teikef umiyad mamish. So now, according to this, we can understand that all the other explanations on this Possuk, that Yakov Ovinu, that the Eibishter is trying to console Yakov Ovinu, don't be afraid, this and that. No. Rashi says we are not worried here. The Eibishter is making a statement. Al tira mer de Mitzrayim. You have nothing to worry about. Why? Because you know that you are in Golus, you understand it, and the concept is to get back into Eretz Yisroel. Any questions? Where do we see this concept of the Shivim Nefesh being a Am, being a nation? Yeah, as I mentioned before, this is something, by the way, there's a beautiful Sikha from the Rebbe in Likutei Sichos Chelik Chof, where the Rebbe explains over here, how did we get the Shivim Nefesh? How did we get the 70 people? Because Yocheved was born right there and then. She was the one that made it into number 70. So based on that, it's a long arichas, but the point is that the number 70 is the completion. And Rashi says in Vayishlach that before Binyamin was born, right before Binyamin was born, the Rebbe came to Avrohom Ovinu, to Yakov Ovinu, and said, Goyukal goyim yimeko. I'm going to have nations coming out of you. Says Rashi, you're going to have children just like all the nations. Why was the number 70? Because all the nations are 70. And why is the number 70? Because by Yidden the number 70 is very important. The Sanhedrin is 70, etc. So that's why the number 70 shows on the Am. And that is why Dafki here, at this point, Yakov Ovinu had a little problem leaving Eretz Yisroel, because in his mind, Legoy Godel Simcha Sham meant Eretz Yisroel. And the Rebbe explained to him, no, that this is going to be Dafki in Golus. And as the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya beautifully, we're going soon to Chavdala Teves, the Alter Rebbe's yahrzeit. The Alter Rebbe in Tanya in Perek Lamed Zayin, he makes it so beautiful and explains how the whole Golus is a preparation to the Geula. That's what Yakov Ovinu taught us, that he went down to Mitzrayim, Dafke, because through Golus, Legoy Godel Simcha Sham, and may it be Teikef Umiyad Mamish in the Geula Amitis Vashlema in the Beis Hamikdash Hashlishi.